Hey, things are really tight right now. I texted my family after losing my job. They read it and stayed silent. Months later, Dad called and demanded $2,500 for my sister's car. Hey everyone, I'm Eric, 34, living in a small city in Oregon. I've been lurking here for years, reading all the posts about entitled parents, toxic families, and wild revenge stories, never thinking I'd have one of my own worth sharing. I always figured my family was just a bit dysfunctional in the normal way. A few guilt trips here, a little emotional manipulation there, nothing out of the ordinary. But a few months ago, everything changed. What started as a simple group chat message turned into something that would completely alter how I see my family and honestly myself, too. I grew up in what most people would call a close-knit family. We weren't rich, but we weren't struggling either. My dad worked in construction his whole life, and my mom was a teacher. They raised three of us. My older brother, Mark, 36, my younger sister, Kelly, 28, and me, the middle child. Mark was always the golden boy, the one Dad bragged about to his friends, the one who could do no wrong. He was athletic, confident, and had that slick kind of charm that made people think he was smarter than he actually was. Kelly, on the other hand, was the baby, coddled, spoiled, and perpetually rescued from every bad decision she made. Then there was me. I was the quiet one, the dependable one, the one who showed up early, stayed late, and got things done without a fuss. I never complained because I thought that's what good sons do. Things were fine. Or maybe I just told myself they were until I got laid off. It wasn't anyone's fault. Really. The company I worked for downsized after a merger, and I was caught in the middle. One morning, I had a steady paycheck, a comfortable apartment, and plans for the future. By afternoon, I had a cardboard box full of my desk stuff and a hollow feeling in my stomach. I wasn't used to asking for help. I'd always been self-sufficient, the one other people came to when things went wrong. But after a few weeks of job hunting, with rent looming and my savings drying up, I started to panic. That's when I did something I never thought I'd do. I reached out to my family. I remember sitting on the couch typing out a message in our family group chat. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a long time before I hit send. Hey, things are really tight right now. If anyone has a spare meal or even just wants to talk, I'd really appreciate it. It wasn't a demand. It wasn't even a request for money. I just wanted someone to acknowledge that I was struggling. I watched the little delivered check mark appear next to my message and waited. Nothing. At first, I figured they were busy. My mum sometimes took hours to reply and my dad wasn't much of a texter. But then I saw it. The read receipt under Mark's name. He'd opened it. No response. A few minutes later, a notification popped up on Instagram. It was a story from Mark. I shouldn't have looked, but curiosity got the better of me. There he was, standing in front of his truck, posting one of those gym mirror-type selfies with the caption, "Some people just need to work harder." It hit me like a punch to the gut. I stared at my phone for a long time, wondering if it was directed at me. I wanted to tell myself it wasn't, that it was just a coincidence. But deep down, I knew it was his passive-aggressive way of saying, "Don't come to me for help." That night, I barely slept. It wasn't just embarrassment. It was the sting of realizing that when I was at my lowest, my family, the people I'd done so much for, couldn't even offer me a kind word. A week went by, then two. Still nothing. No one called, no one texted, no one asked if I was okay. I started cutting back on groceries, canceling subscriptions, doing whatever I could to stretch what little money I had left. But every night, I'd open that group chat and stare at my message, sitting there like a ghost in the room, unanswered, ignored. The silence said more than any cruel words ever could. Then, one afternoon when I was sitting in the parking lot of a job interview that hadn't gone well, I got a text from my dad of all people. For a second, I felt this flicker of hope. Maybe he was checking in. Maybe he'd noticed the silence, too. But when I opened the message, it just said, "Mark's birthday dinner Sunday. Don't forget to bring something." That was it. No. "How are you?" No mention of my situation. Just a reminder to show up, bring food, and pretend everything was fine. I almost didn't go. I wanted to just stay home, crawl into bed, and forget about the whole thing. But something in me couldn't let it go. I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of thinking they'd broken me. So that Sunday, I showed up at my parents' house with a half-empty smile and a store-bought pie I'd bought on sale. Everyone was there. Mark, Kelly, my parents, all chatting, laughing, acting like nothing was wrong. I took my usual seat at the end of the table and listened as they talked about Mark's promotion, Kelly's new apartment, and Dad's upcoming fishing trip. Not one person asked how I was doing. At one point, Mark leaned back in his chair, looked at me, and said, "So, you find a job yet?" The way he said it, that smug half-smile on his face, made it clear he already knew the answer. "Still looking," I said, keeping my tone neutral. He chuckled and said, "Man, tough world out there. Maybe you should try what I do. Get up early, grind harder, no excuses." The room went quiet for a moment, and I could feel my mom's disapproving glance, like she wanted me to just let it go. So, I did. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of a reaction, but inside, something in me hardened. I realized that no matter what I did, I'd never be anything more than the family's punching bag. The dependable middle child who was expected to show up, shut up, and be grateful. Then, just when things were starting to feel hopeless, life threw me a curveball in a good way for once. A friend from college reached out about a position opening at his company. It wasn't glamorous, but it was solid work with good pay and benefits. I nailed the interview, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. Within a few weeks, I was back on my feet. I moved into a new apartment, paid off my overdue bills, and even started saving again. It felt like I was finally closing that awful chapter of my life. I thought I'd put all that bitterness behind me until one morning about a month later. My phone buzzed with a call from my dad. I hadn't heard from him since Mark's birthday dinner. His voice was calm, almost too calm. "Hey, Eric," he said. "How are things going?" I told him I was doing well, that I'd found a new job and was getting settled. There was a pause. Then he sighed. "Listen," he said, "your sister's car broke down. She needs $2,500 fast. Can you help?" For a second, I just sat there staring out my office window. The irony of it all almost made me laugh. A month ago, I couldn't even get a reply to a message asking for emotional support. And now, suddenly, they were coming to me for money. I leaned back in my chair, took a slow sip of coffee, and let the silence stretch just long enough for him to start sounding nervous. Then I said, and that's where things started to get really interesting. I didn't answer him right away. I just sat there letting his request hang in the air like a thick fog. My dad wasn't used to silence. Not from me. Anyway, I'd always been the one who said yes before he even finished asking. I could almost picture him gripping the phone tighter, waiting for me to swoop in and fix things like I always did. "Finally," I said quietly, "you're calling me after all this time?" He hesitated. "Well, yeah. Eric, you're good with money, Eric. You've always been responsible. Kelly's in a tight spot, and your mom and I are stretched thin this month." Responsible. That word hit differently now. I asked him what happened to Kelly's car. Apparently, she'd ignored a check engine light for weeks until it completely broke down. The mechanic quoted her a repair cost of $2,500, and of course, she didn't have the money. She'd spent her last paycheck on essentials. I told her she needs to learn to budget. My dad said, like it was somehow funny. But, she's still young. She's 28. I reminded him. He chuckled awkwardly. Right. But she's your sister. Eric. Family helps family. That phrase, family helps family, felt like a slap in the face. I told him I'd think about it and hung up. I spent the rest of the day replaying everything in my mind. The silence after my message, Mark's Instagram post, the smug tone at dinner, all the years I'd spent cleaning up their messes, covering for them, helping out when things went wrong, and getting nothing but indifference in return. That night, I got a text from Kelly herself. It was just 3 words, needed ASAP, no greeting, no explanation, not even a please. It was like she was placing an order at a drive-thru. I didn't respond. The next morning, I had 4 missed calls, 2 from her, 1 from my mum, and 1 from my dad. The group chat, which had been silent for months, suddenly lit up with messages. Mum, Eric, your sister's really upset. Can you just send it to her? We'll make it up to you. Dad, she's stranded at work right now. Be a good brother. Kelly, you literally have a good job now. What's the big deal? The nerve. The absolute nerve. I stared at my phone, my heart pounding. I couldn't believe the audacity. When I'd needed just someone to talk to, they'd ghosted me. Now they were demanding money like it was an obligation. I ignored them all day. By evening, Mark chimed in. Mark, dude, just help her out. Don't be dramatic. That was it. That was the final shove. I could feel something boiling in me. Over the next week, the calls kept coming. My mum left voicemails, her voice soft and guilt-laden. Eric, sweetheart, I know you're upset, but Kelly's really in trouble. You know how she gets when she's stressed. Yeah, I knew exactly how she got. Careless, entitled, and certain someone would always rescue her. Then the manipulation began. Mum called one evening and said, you know, when you were in college, we helped you out with tuition. We never asked for anything in return. It would mean a lot if you could show the same generosity. I almost laughed. Help me out. I worked 2 part-time jobs through college. They covered 1 semester's books and acted like they'd paid my entire way. But I didn't say that. I just said, I'll think about it. And hung up. The next day, I found out what thinking about it earned me. Kelly posted on social media one of those vague woe-is-me posts about how some people in the family forget where they came from once they start making money. She didn't name me, but everyone knew. It was surreal watching her play the victim so easily, like she'd rehearsed it. And my parents, they didn't defend me. They didn't even call to ask my side. They just let the narrative unfold. A few days later, I went to visit my parents. Mostly because I needed to see their faces to see if they actually believed the nonsense Kelly was spreading. The moment I walked in, the tension was thick. My mum was at the kitchen table pretending to read, and my dad was watching TV, but not really watching it. Hey, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Mum looked up. Eric, I don't understand why you're being so stubborn. She's your sister. I stared at her. Stubborn for not giving away thousands of dollars after you all ignored me when I couldn't even buy groceries. Her lips tightened. That's not fair. Fair. I almost laughed when I sent that message. You all read it and said nothing, not even hang in there. But now suddenly I'm the selfish one because I won't fund Kelly's bad habits. She didn't answer. She just sighed and said, You're overreacting. That was her go-to line whenever I made a point she couldn't refute. Then my dad chimed in. Look, Eric, this isn't about the past. It's about family pulling together when someone needs help. Family pulling together. I repeated slowly. Right. Except it only works one way, doesn't it? His jaw tightened, but he didn't say anything else. I left before I said something I couldn't take back. A few days later, I got a text from Kelly again. It said, I borrowed from Mark. He said you were being difficult. Guess we know who the favorite is now. Winky face. That stupid winking emoji nearly made me throw my phone across the room. I should have let it go. I really should have. But something inside me, that small, weary part that had been stepped on too many times. Decided enough was enough. I stopped answering their calls. I muted the group chat. I focused on my new job and quietly started setting boundaries, things I'd never done before. But the more distance I tried to create, the more they pushed. Mum started showing up at my apartment unannounced. Once she brought leftovers and said, "We miss you." Kelly told us, "You're mad because she couldn't pay you back fast enough." I blinked. Pay me back. I never gave her a cent. Her smile faltered. She said, "You did." That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about the money. It was about control, the narrative, the family roles, the way they all saw me. I was supposed to be the dependable one, the fixer, the silent helper. But the second I stopped playing that part, they didn't know what to do with me. Things only escalated from there. Kelly started telling relatives I'd changed, that I'd become cold and arrogant since getting my new job. At first, I tried to ignore it. But then my aunt called and said, "Eric, I heard you're cutting ties with the family. Are you okay?" I wanted to scream. I wanted to shout the truth. Instead, I just said, "I'm fine," and hung up. Then came the final straw, the breaking point. It was a Sunday afternoon when my dad called again. His tone was different this time, urgent, a little shaky. "Eric, can you come over? We need to talk." Against my better judgment, I went. When I got there, everyone was already sitting in the living room. Mom, Dad, Mark, and Kelly. The air was thick, and I immediately knew something was off. Dad cleared his throat. "Your sister's been really upset," he began. Kelly sniffled dramatically. "I just don't understand why you're so mean to me." "Eric, I was just trying to ask for help." I folded my arms. "You mean when you and everyone else ignored me for months and then expected me to hand over thousands of dollars?" She shook her head, tears welling up. "That's not fair." "You're twisting it." Mark leaned forward. "Bro, you've been acting weird ever since you got that new job. It's like you think you're better than us." "I don't think I'm better," I said, my voice tight. "I just finally realized I deserve the same respect I've been giving for years." My mum sighed. "This isn't who you are, Eric. You've always been the kind one." "No," I said quietly. "I've always been the quiet one. There's a difference." For a second, no one spoke. Then Kelly stood up and said, "You know what? Maybe I shouldn't have asked you for help. You clearly don't care about family." And then, as she grabbed her purse to storm off, something slipped out of my dad's mouth that made everything inside me go cold. "Well, if you hadn't spent your bonus on that new laptop, maybe you could have helped her." I froze. "How do you know about my bonus?" The silence that followed told me everything. I turned to Kelly. She looked guilty, then defiant. "You told them?" I asked. She crossed her arms. "You posted about your promotion. I figured you could afford it." My mind was spinning. I hadn't told anyone the details of my finances. I hadn't even mentioned the bonus publicly. The only person I'd shared that with privately in confidence was my mum weeks ago when she asked how things were going. That's when it hit me. They'd been talking about me behind my back. They'd been keeping tabs, twisting my words, turning my success into ammunition. I felt something inside me snap. Years of quiet loyalty, swallowed pride, and second chances. All of it cracked in that moment. I stood up, took a slow breath, and said, "You know what? I think I finally get it. This family only cares about me when I have something to give." My dad frowned. "That's not true." But I cut him off. "No, it's exactly true. When I needed you, I was invisible. But the moment I had something you wanted, suddenly I mattered again." I grabbed my coat. My mum tried to stop me, saying, "Eric, please don't leave like this." But I was already walking out the door. My heart was pounding, but underneath the anger, there was something else. Clarity. What I didn't know then was that this was only the beginning, because the very next morning, I got a message that changed everything and set in motion a plan I never thought I'd have the nerve to carry out. When I left my parents' house that night, I didn't drive straight home. I pulled into a deserted parking lot, killed the engine, and just sat there in the quiet. The rain had started again. Soft, steady, almost cleansing. But inside, I felt hollow. I kept replaying their faces, their words, that look of disbelief when I finally stood up for myself. For years, I'd been the one who kept the peace, the one who apologized first, the one who made things right. But this time, I couldn't do it anymore. Something had broken, and there was no gluing it back together. I must have sat there for an hour before I drove home. When I got inside, the silence hit me like a wave. My apartment had always been a safe place, but that night, it felt different. Not lonely exactly, but empty in a way I couldn't explain. I made coffee just to have something to do with my hands, but it went cold on the counter. My phone kept buzzing. Text from Mum, a missed call from Dad, and one final message from Kelly that simply said, "You're pathetic." I didn't reply. I deleted it, turned off my phone, and for the first time in a long time, I let myself cry. Not just because of what they'd said or done, but because I finally understood the truth. I'd been chasing their approval my entire life. Every late-night favor, every sacrifice, every quiet apology. It was all an attempt to earn love that was never unconditional to begin with. The next few weeks were rough. The silence from my family didn't last long. Word spread through relatives that I'd walked out on everyone. My aunt called to say, "Your mum's heartbroken. She says, you've changed." I didn't even know how to respond. Changed? Maybe I had. Maybe I was finally seeing things clearly. Work became my refuge. I threw myself into it, staying late, volunteering for extra projects, trying to drown out the noise in my head. My manager, a quiet guy named Ben, noticed. "You okay, Eric?" he asked. One evening when everyone else had gone home. "I'm fine," I said automatically. He gave me this knowing look. "You're not, but you will be." It was such a simple thing to say, but it stuck with me. I hadn't realized how badly I needed someone to believe that things could actually get better. As the months passed, I started to settle into a new rhythm. I saved money, upgraded my apartment, and joined a local running group to force myself out of my comfort zone. The first few runs were brutal. I was out of shape and out of breath, but the people there didn't care about my job, my family, or my past. They just saw a guy trying his best to keep up. There was something freeing about that. One evening after iron, a woman named Dana handed me a bottle of water and said, "You always look like you're running from something." I laughed. "Maybe I am." She smiled. "That's okay. Most of us are. The trick is learning to run towards something instead." That line stayed with me. I started focusing on what I wanted to build, not what I'd lost. I took a few online courses to sharpen my skills, started budgeting properly, and even began sketching out a business idea I'd shelved years ago. It wasn't much, just a concept for a small side project, but it gave me a sense of direction again. Meanwhile, my family kept their distance until they didn't. It started small. My mum sent a text around the holidays. "We're having dinner on Christmas Eve. It would mean a lot if you came." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to go to see if things had changed, to see if maybe the dust had settled, against my better judgment. I said yes. When I arrived, the house looked exactly the same. Same decorations, same smell of cinnamon and pine, same faint hum of the TV in the background, but the energy was different, cautious, strained. My mum hugged me like I was a guest she hadn't seen in years, and my dad gave me a stiff nod. Kelly was there too, scrolling on her phone, pretending not to see me. Dinner was awkward but civil. My parents made small talk about work and the weather. Kelly barely spoke until halfway through when she finally looked up and said, So, how's the new job? Still doing whatever it is you do? I forced a smile. Still doing well? Thanks. She shrugged. Good for you. There was something in her tone, a mix of jealousy and dismissal that made my stomach turn. I realized then that no matter how polite I was, no matter how much I tried to move forward, she'd always see me as competition. After dinner, my mum cornered me in the kitchen while I was rinsing dishes. You know, she said softly, it would mean a lot to your sister if you two could just talk. She's been under a lot of stress. I stared at the sink. Mom, every time I try to talk to her, she twists it. She lied about me. Remember? Mum sighed. She didn't lie. She just exaggerated. I turned off the water and looked at her. You do realize that's the same thing, right? She didn't answer. Instead, she reached out and squeezed my arm. You're her brother. You're supposed to look out for her. That was the moment I knew nothing had really changed. They still saw me as the caretaker, the fixer, the one who'd quietly absorb everyone else's mistakes. I said goodnight and left before dessert. The next morning, I woke up to a flurry of messages in the family chat. Apparently, Kelly had posted a long Facebook rant about toxic relatives who hold grudges and think they're better than everyone else. She didn't mention names, but again, everyone knew. And yet, something strange happened that day. Instead of feeling hurt or angry, I felt detached, like her words couldn't reach me anymore. For the first time, I didn't feel the need to defend myself. I had my own life now, my own peace. That's when things started to shift. My side project, the one I'd been quietly building, began to take off. It was a small online consultancy helping small businesses streamline their operations. Nothing fancy, but it caught traction fast. Within 6 months, I was making enough to consider leaving my full-time job. My boss, Ben, was thrilled for me. Told you'd be fine, he said with a grin. I built a little home office, started hiring freelancers, and slowly the business grew. The work was fulfilling, not because it made me money, but because it was mine. Every late night, every breakthrough, every client I helped felt like a step away from the person I used to be, the one who lived for everyone else's approval. By the time spring rolled around, I was in a completely different place. I'd started therapy, something I'd avoided for years, and it helped me unpack a lot of what had happened. The guilt, the exhaustion, the need to always be the good one. My therapist said something that stuck with me. You were trained to believe love had conditions. You're finally unlearning that. And she was right. For months, I didn't hear from my family. No calls, no texts, no surprise visits. It was peaceful, if a little sad. I missed the idea of family, the version I used to believe in, but not the reality of it. I learned to fill that space with people who genuinely cared. My running group, new friends, colleagues who saw my worth without expecting anything in return. Then one random Thursday morning, the silence broke again. I was reviewing client reports when my phone buzzed. It was a message from my dad. Can we talk? It's important. My stomach sank. I didn't know what to expect. Part of me thought someone might be sick, or maybe they finally wanted to apologize. Against my better judgment, I replied. Sure. What's going on? He called immediately. His tone was calm, but there was an undercurrent of something. Tension. Maybe even desperation. Eric, he said, your sister's in a bit of trouble again. Of course she was. I leaned back in my chair. What kind of trouble? He hesitated. Financial. She made a few unwise choices, took out some loans. She can't repay the bank's threatening legal action. I felt that old ache creep back in the familiar tug between duty and self-preservation. He went on explaining that Kelly had started a small boutique online but hadn't managed it well. Now she was tens of thousands in debt. I didn't say anything for a while. I could hear him breathing on the other end, waiting for me to offer a solution. Finally, I asked, And what exactly do you expect me to do about it? There was a long pause. Then he said she needs someone to co-sign a consolidation loan just to help her get back on track. I laughed softly. Not out of humor, but disbelief. You've got to be kidding. He sighed. I know she's made mistakes, but she's family. Eric, you've got the means now. You could really make a difference. It was almost poetic how the cycle tried to start again. The old script, word for word. But this time, something inside me had changed. I wasn't that same quiet, desperate to please son anymore. I had rebuilt myself from the ground up without them. I didn't give him an answer that day. Instead, I told him I'd think about it. Not because I planned to agree, but because I needed time to decide what kind of ending this story would have. That night, as I sat in my office, surrounded by everything I'd worked for, I realized something important. I didn't know them the version of me they expected. I didn't owe them silence or sacrifice or endless forgiveness. But I did owe myself something. Closure. And as fate would have it, I was about to get my chance, because the very next week, I got an unexpected invitation that would drag every buried resentment, every old wound back into the light and force me to make a choice that would change everything for me and for them. The invitation came on a quiet Tuesday morning. An email from my mom with the subject line, family gathering, important announcement. I almost deleted it, thinking it was another guilt-laden attempt to lure me back. But something about it felt off. Family matters. That wasn't her phrasing. My gut told me there was more to it, and I was curious. Maybe too curious. I called Ben, my old manager and friend, over coffee. Sounds like they're setting you up for something, he said. I know, I replied. But maybe this time I'm the one doing the setting up. Over the next few days, I started planning. I wasn't looking for petty revenge. I wanted clarity, balance, and for them to see. I gathered evidence, screenshots, emails, bank transfers, every instance I'd helped them financially or covered for their mistakes. Rent, car repairs, bills, tuition, countless emergencies. I'd handled quietly. I didn't plan to demand repayment. This was about demonstrating how much they'd relied on me without acknowledgement. I also investigated Kelly's business troubles. Her online boutique was failing. Supplier complaints, customer refunds missing, contracts defaulted. The truth was clear. Her financial chaos wasn't just bad luck. It was mismanagement. For the first time, I saw it all laid bare. That Friday, I met Dana after our run. You've got that look again, she said, deciding whether to go home. Yeah, I admitted they invited me to dinner. I think they want something and you're going. I nodded, but I'm not going blind. This time I'm in control. She smiled. Standing up for yourself isn't cruelty. Saturday arrived. I parked outside their house and felt calm for the first time in years. I walked in, greeting everyone with polite composure. Mum's face lit up with forced cheer. Eric, I'm so glad you came. I smiled faintly. Wouldn't miss it. Dinner began awkwardly, small talk masking tension. Kelly barely glanced up from her phone. Mark smirked, trying to assert dominance with jokes about my new business. Still running that little operation of yours. I nodded calm. Yeah, it's going well. Funny. Nothing like running a family business. The subtle jab was noted. Mark's smirk faltered slightly. Kelly's brow furrowed. Already, I had their attention. After dinner, Dad cleared his throat. We wanted to discuss something important. Kelly's had some issues with her business and Kelly interrupted dramatically. It's not my fault. Suppliers backed out. The economy is bad. I just need help. Mum nodded sympathetic. We thought maybe as a family we could help her. And by help you mean? I asked. Dad hesitated. She needs a co-signer for a loan. Just temporary. You'd be saving her from serious trouble. I leaned back in my chair, smiling faintly. I see. Mark shrugged. I'd help, but with my mortgage. Bad timing. You're in a better position. Man. Of course. Conveniently unavailable. Mom reached for my hand. Eric, you've always been the reliable one. That's when I pulled out the folder. A small, neat stack of printed screenshots, emails, and financial records. I think it's only fair for everyone to see the full picture. The room went quiet. Mum's face drained of color. Dad looked uncomfortable. Kelly's eyes widened. This is all of this, she stammered. All of it, I said. Every time I've helped, every time I've covered for missteps, every loan, bill, or favor. And here are the mistakes, exaggerations, and failures from the rest of you that affected me, including Kelly's boutique, which has been failing due to poor management, and Mark's stories of achievement, which are inflated. Their faces shifted. Shock, disbelief, panic. You're seriously keeping score, Kelly said. Pathetic. No, I said quietly. This is reality. The reality you've ignored while assuming I'd always step in. And now the opportunity to manipulate me has passed. Dad's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then whispered, Well, I'll be... Mom leaned in. What is it? On the screen. The local paper's article was live. From rock bottom to CEO. Local man turns setback into success. My photo showed me confident, professional, independent. Kelly froze. Wait, what? I shrugged casually. Timing is everything. I didn't need approval. I didn't need rescuing. This is me thriving on my own. Mark muttered. You planned this. No, I said. I documented the truth. I built my life. And now you're witnessing the result. The room fell silent. Mum opened her mouth, then closed it. Dad's face was pale. Kelly's jaw tightened. Mark's smugness faltered. I stood calm and deliberate. I came to listen, but I think I've heard enough. Their stunned silence was perfect. For the first time, I wasn't shrinking under their gaze. I wasn't pleading, apologizing, or bending. I was free. And what they didn't know, what none of them could have guessed, was that this was only the beginning. I had all the leverage, all the truth, and the power to define the final outcome. This time, they were on my terms. The next week. I didn't reach out to anyone. I didn't answer calls, texts, or the dozen follow-ups from my mum insisting we talk things over. I let them stew in their own uncertainty. And the feeling was electric. It wasn't malicious, at least, not in the sense that it was about cruelty. It was about control, about flipping the script after years of being the family's doormat. For the first time, I wasn't reacting to them. They were reacting to me. I spent that week putting the final touches on a little surprise that would make the family dinner an event they'd never forget. I had all the documentation lined up. Kelly's failed business records, the screenshots of her exaggerated complaints, Mark's little brags and lies, and a comprehensive ledger of every financial favor, handout, or repair I'd quietly handled for them. I knew their egos were fragile, but I also knew that seeing their own mismanagement juxtaposed with my growth and independence would hit them harder than anything I could say. Saturday night arrived, and the tension was palpable before I even opened the door. My parents had invited me for another family gathering under the guise of discussing a potential joint investment Kelly wanted to pitch. I smiled as I parked, feeling calm and untouchable. The air smelled faintly of cinnamon and pine, a ritualistic scent that my mum always used to make everything feel cozy and harmless. I walked in casually greeting everyone and taking a seat at the table. "Eric," Mum exclaimed, flustered. "You're here early. Wouldn't want to miss the meeting," I replied evenly. Kelly was scrolling on her phone, oblivious, and Mark leaned back in his chair with his usual smug grin. "You've been busy, huh? Still running that little operation of yours?" I nodded, smiling. "Yeah, it's been going well. Funny though, it's nothing like running a family business." I could see the irritation flicker in Mark's eyes. and Kelly's brow furrowed. Already. I had them right where I wanted. Dinner started like any other, polite and cautious, with my parents trying to ease tension. Then, when the plates were cleared, I finally brought out the folder. "This is something I've been working on," I said, laying it gently on the table. I thought it would be fair for everyone to see a comprehensive history of how I've supported this family over the years, financially, emotionally, and otherwise. Mum's face went pale immediately. "Eric." "I don't think, Mum, please," I interrupted calmly. "I want everyone to see this clearly." I flipped open the folder and began showing each page. Screenshots of bank transfers to Kelly for rent, Mark for car repairs. Countless times I'd paid for family emergencies they hadn't even acknowledged, and emails documenting years of ignored requests for help, or even a kind word when I needed it most. The room grew quiet. Kelly's mouth opened, closed, then opened again. Mark's eyes darted nervously to my dad, who was trying not to look as shocked as he was. "This is all of this?" Kelly stammered. I nodded. "All of it. And I've kept records of every misstep and exaggeration made by the rest of you that's impacted me. For example, Kelly's business, the one that keeps failing because she can't manage finances, is well documented in these supplier complaints. I spread out printed screenshots from the forums and client complaints. And Mark, your little tales of brilliance, inflated, all verifiable errors and exaggerations. You may be the golden boy in Dad's eyes, but the truth is very different." The air was electric, almost thick with disbelief and anger. Mom covered her mouth with her hand. Dad's face was white. Kelly's eyes were wide as if she were seeing me for the first time. "I see," Mark muttered, trying to maintain control. "And what exactly is your point?" "Eric." I smiled. But it wasn't mean. It was sharp, precise, and full of intent. The point is simple. I am no longer the family's silent servant. I am no longer the one expected to bail everyone out or silently accept disrespect. I've built a life independently. I've become successful without your interference, your manipulation, or your favoritism. I pulled out my phone and tapped a few buttons. A moment later, the front page of my laptop displayed the article from the local newspaper. From rock bottom to CEO, local man turns setback into success. The photo showed me confident, smiling, professional, and completely self-sufficient. Mum gasped. "Eric, you didn't know." "Exactly," I said. "I don't need approval, and I don't need rescuing. This article proves it. I've earned my independence. I've worked for every step, unlike what you like to assume about me." Kelly's voice rose. "You're rubbing it in." I shook my head. "No, I'm simply showing facts, the same way you exaggerate, manipulate, and rely on others. I've documented everything to show what true effort looks like and the timing. Well, let's just say some things fall into place perfectly when you stop chasing approval and start living for yourself." Mark's face had gone red and he shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Eric, this is excessive." "No," I said softly, leaning forward, calm but unyielding. "This is reality. The reality you've tried to ignore while continuing your comfortable lives at my expense. And the reality you are now forced to face. I am in control of my own life. I don't need you. I don't need Kelly's crisis. I don't need Mark's judgment. And I don't need Mom and Dad's selective approval." Mom's hand trembled slightly as she reached out. "Eric, we didn't realize." I shook my head gently. "No, you realized exactly what was happening. You chose to ignore it. And now the opportunity to manipulate me has passed." Kelly was shaking with fury. "You think this is over? You think showing off your money and success changes anything?" I smiled faintly. "No. What changes everything is that I am no longer part of the cycle. I don't have to engage in your drama anymore. I am free. You want drama? Go ahead. But it won't touch me." Dad opened his mouth, then closed it again. I could see the confusion, the disbelief, The authority he had wielded over me for decades was evaporating. The golden child, the coddled daughter, and the so-called loving parents. All their narratives had been stripped bare, and the silence that followed was the loudest sound I'd ever heard in my life. Over the next few days, I kept my distance. I continued running my business, building my consultancy, and solidifying my life. The family didn't reach out much. The guilt, shock, and humiliation were enough to keep them silent. Then, little by little, I started seeing the fallout. Mark's promotion wasn't as secure as he'd boasted. Colleagues who knew the truth of his laziness began to challenge him, and his credibility took a noticeable hit. Kelly's boutique faltered further once clients and suppliers learned about her mismanagement. And without my bailouts, she faced real consequences for the first time. My parents had to confront the fact that their middle child, the one they had taken for granted for decades, was thriving independently, proving everything they had failed to teach. Friends and colleagues began complimenting me on my poise, my intelligence, and the strategic calm with which I handled the family drama. For the first time, I felt not just respected, but seen, not as a middle child, not as a helper, not as a backup plan, but as Eric, successful, self-reliant, and confident. A month later, I received a formal invitation from the same local paper to do a featured interview, this time about building resilience after family trauma. I smiled as I typed out my acceptance. I wasn't seeking revenge anymore. The revenge had already happened. It wasn't about humiliation or punishment. It was about reclaiming myself. The last text I ever got from Kelly was short and venomous. Enjoy your life. Don't expect me to be a part of it. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. She and everyone else had already lost their hold over me. I had won in a way they never could take back. I leaned back in my office chair, sipping my coffee, watching the morning sun hit my new apartment. The city was alive outside, full of possibility. And for the first time in my life, I felt completely untouchable. Because in finally standing up for myself, in documenting the truth, in seizing my own power, I hadn't just won over my family. I had won over me. And that's a victory no one could ever take away. I smiled because for the first time, I realized something that would stay with me forever. Sometimes the best revenge isn't anger, it's success, calm, undeniable, and complete. And this time I had.